In this video, we are going to learn how to use Xgen in Maya to create grass assets for Unreal Engine 5. To get started, you need to make sure that you have a Maya project set up. So if you don't have a project already, go to File and Project window. You can see that I already have one, which I'm using, Xgen Demo. To create a new one, you can just hit New over here. Once you create a project, just go to File and Set Project and select your project so that Xgen redirects to the correct place. The reason we're doing this and the reason it's even more important for Xgen is because when you're working inside Xgen, it does create some residual files that needs somewhere to go to, and if you don't have a project set up, you might lose some of your work because Maya doesn't know where to save your files. So once you have that set up, go to the Xgen workspace. You can do this by clicking on this workspace dropdown and selecting Xgen. You'll notice that there are two Xgen items here. I'm using the legacy Xgen, which is the slightly older version of Xgen, and this is slightly newer. Both of them have some similar controls and some aspects of their workflow that are similar, but I just use this one a lot. When you're in the Xgen window, in some cases, sometimes, Xgen can be a little buggy, so you might not see anything in this window even if you see Xgen on the top over here. If that does happen, just save your file, close Maya and open it again, and this should reappear. If this happens at any point during your project, or if you see anything buggy happening with Xgen, it's usually a good idea to just close Maya and open it again, and a lot of times that will fix whatever weirdness is going on. So now let's start creating the Xgen. To do this, you need to have a geometry to grow the grass out of. And I'm just using a regular plane for this, and I'm going to scale it up slightly. If this is too small, you won't be able to see the grass that you're generating because there's not enough space for it to be generated on. So just scale this up slightly. And once you do that, right-click and assign a Lambert 1 material to it. The Lambert 1 material is necessary because Xgen is a legacy tool, and some of the maps that we paint on Xgen requires the Lambert 1 material so that it works correctly. And another thing that Xgen requires is that your UVs are within the 0 to 1 tile, so in the first UV tile. And if you're using a plane, this is already done by default, so you can just leave it as it is. Once you have that, you can now create a new description. And a description is basically, our description in our case is going to be the grass asset that we're creating. But if we're making a scene in Unreal Engine, we might want maybe 2 or 3 grass assets that we scatter around the scene. And in that case, we might want more than one description. So let's see how this works. So if I click on create new description, make sure you have this plane selected before you create new description, and then you will bring up this window. So I'm going to call this grass asset 1. And then it asks you for a collection. So the collection can just be called foliage. So if you're creating multiple grass assets, they can all be saved in this collection called foliage. And I'm going to leave this at the default. I just always use splines and I scatter them randomly across the surface. For this one, I'm going to say placing and shaping guides. This is because I prefer this workflow. If you're familiar with the MEL script and know what expressions to use, you can use attributes controlled by expressions. But I'm just going to go with this and click on create. And I'm going to, so I think maybe I've already created a collection before, so I'm just going to overwrite it. Let's hope that's fine. And now you should be able to create Xgen. But you'll see that it gave you an error just now. That's because we've set this description to use guides, but we haven't really created any guides. So what is a guide? A guide is basically an object that tells the Xgen description which direction to grow in. And you can create it. You can see that there's this plus icon at the top. This is add or move guide, so you can create it using that. But before I do that, I'm just going to go to the top and switch to the Xgen shelf. So the Xgen shelf also has the same tool, and it has a few extra tools that are not there in the section. So the left side of the Xgen shelf is the legacy Xgen that we are using right now, and the right side is for interactive group. This is just something to keep in mind. So for our case, we're just going to stick to all of these tools. Let's start with the add or move guides. So I'm going to click on this plus sign, and I'm going to create a guide. So keep in mind that this is not our actual grass. This is just telling our grass where to grow. And grass usually grows in clumps. So I'm just going to create a few more guides that are kind of close together. And once we have that, I'm going to click on this to go back to object mode. And now let's make these guides a little more interesting. So we want our grass to grow in different directions. So I'm just going to scale this up. Keep in mind that the scale of this does not affect the width of your grass. It's just going to affect the height and the shape. So I'm going to scale it up. And then I'm going to use this tool, which is Sculpt Guides. And you can use B and left mouse click to scale up this brush. And then you can just move it around. And then I'm going to do the same to this piece of grass. So I'm just going to scale it up and then sculpt it so that I have some variation. I'm just going to do this to all the pieces of grass and get back. Okay, so now I have some guides. They are sculpted in a certain shape, but I don't really see any hair yet. So to actually have the Xgen hair get created, let's go to our Xgen window right here and click on this eye icon. And you can see that we now have one strand of grass. So to actually get more grass that matches these guides, just go to density and turn that up a bit. You can see that it creates a few more strands of grass. And that's a good start. We have something right here. If you want to hide or show your guides, because remember that these guides are not actually your grass, you can just click on this icon and that hides and shows the guides, and this is what your actual grass is going to look like. This doesn't look a lot like grass yet, so let's change some things. And at the start, all of the things we're going to change are going to be in this Xgen window, and then we'll move on to the modifiers window. So let's start making this look a little more like grass. So I'm going to go to the bottom section here, primitive attributes, turn off tube shade. So now we see the grass as planes, which is what we want. When we finally put this in Unreal Engine, it is going to be in the form of planes. So this is what it's going to look like. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to turn off face camera, because when Xgen is an Xgen object, it always faces your camera. But our end result is going to be converted into polygons, and we want to make sure this asset will also work as polygons. We're going to leave display width on. You'll see why in a second, because now I'm going to work with the width of these grass strands. So depending on whether you're making realistic or stylized grass, you might want something that's a little bit wider or something that's narrower. So I'm going to go somewhere to this width, and then you have a width ramp right below that. So just if you click on this dot right here, you can take the tip a little bit lower, and then you have grass that tapers from root to tip. And then you can increase or decrease the width based on what you're going for. Once you do that, you have a good start. Then to actually take it a little further, you can use the tilt N and a round N to kind of change how that shape looks. This is up to you based on how you use it. You can see that it is changing the direction, which might be useful if your planes are not facing the camera and you want them to be looking a certain way. So I'm going to leave it at this. I'm not going to play around too much with the tilt and around. And once you do that, you now have something that looks a little bit more like grass. If you see some polygons here and you want this to be a little more smooth, you can work with the modifier CV Count. And I'm just going to change this to maybe 10 or 15 depending on what you want. This just adds a few more polygons or just a little more resolution to your grass asset. So 10 or 15 should be good for short grass plants. So don't go too high for this modifier CV count. And once you do this, you now have something to get started with. You can increase the density if you want more grass in this area. You can turn on the guides again and add more guides if you want to control the direction of the grass a little further. So that is up to you. I'm going to leave it at this. And I'm going to move on to my modifiers tab. So the modifiers basically are used to add some procedural noise or other details to the grass. Since the grass is a pretty simple asset, Xgen is often used for character hair, which is a lot more complex, but since this is a simpler asset, we won't be using as many modifiers. What I'm going to start off with is the noise modifier. And that just adds some noise to this grass so it doesn't grow as evenly as it is right now. I'm going to add it by going up to this plus sign and adding a noise. And I'm going to click on OK. You can immediately see that that makes this grass a lot noisier. And if you increase the magnitude to like 10, it gets way noisier. This is probably not what you want. I'm going to set that to lower, maybe 1. So this adds noise. You can see that if you change the frequency, it just makes it a little wavier. I'm going to set this to maybe 0.5. So we have some noise. You can see that it is adding some variation, but it's not making the grass wavy. And then if you want to control the magnitude of this, so this is set to 1 by default, but if you want a little more randomness to this, you can use an expression here. And that is the stray expression. So what that is that it is going to use something called the stray percentage to add noise to certain areas of this grass and to not have them in certain areas. So where do we find the stray percentage? This is in descriptions and set stray percentage. And I'm going to click on that. And within this, what this is it's basically determining what percentage of the grass follows the rules that you have set. So you've set some rules with the noise. You're going to add some more rules to the modifiers later. So what percentage of the grass follows those rules? And what percentage doesn't? So the stray expression return true. That means that percentage of the grass is not going to follow the rules. So let's say 30% of my grass is not following the rules. So I'm going to set that. And then I'm going to close this out. We don't really need to do anything else. If we close this out, that value gets saved. And then I'm going to put in an expression in the magnitude to kind of use that stray percentage that we set to control the magnitude. That expression is stray. And then this is just the syntax of the expression. And I'm going to say anything that is not stray. So 70% of this grass is going to have a 1.0 magnitude. And then I'm going to add a colon, and that stray percentage, that 30% of grass, that's going to have 0.3 magnitude or maybe 0.4. And let's click on enter, and that kind of changes how the grass looks. So if we increase this number maybe to 0.8, we'll get a different kind of noise because it's basically adding more noise to that stray percentage. If we increase this to a higher number, let's say 2, you can see how that adds a little bit more noise. So you can control how the grass looks by just using the stray percentage, and that adds a little bit more randomness to your grass asset. And this is good. So now this is it with the noise, and this is it without the noise. So you see the noise is better for us because we do want randomness in our grass. And you can also control the magnitude using this root to tip scale. So right now the root has less noise, the tip has more noise. So you can play around with this. If you don't just want a sliding scale, you can add more points in between. If you do that, I would suggest also setting your interpolation to smooth. I'm going to set this to smooth, and I'm going to remove these 2 points. I don't really want them. I can do that by double clicking right below here and here as well. So now I have noise. You can also add a cut modifier, which will basically allow you to add a cut. So what that does is it just cuts the mesh, cuts the Xgen randomly. So I'm going to, if you increase this value to a higher number, it's going to cut it a little more. So this is something that you can use. You can keep stacking modifiers so you can add more noise. If I was creating character hair, I would add clumping as well. So I'm just going to use cut and noise, and that gives us a pretty good result. Once you do that, you can keep modifying this further by using your guides and sculpting them. But since I want to keep this as simple as possible, I'm going to stop over here and I am going to convert this Xgen into polygons to import into Unreal Engine. To do this, all you need to do is go to your outliner, and you see here we have our foliage collection and we have grass asset 1. I'm going to select grass asset 1. If you have more than one grass asset, you can just select the one you want to convert, and I'm going to click on this and go to my generate menu on the top and convert Xgen primitives to polygons. That's all. And I'm going to combine mesh. I do not want to deal with 30 different blades of grass. I do want to use the width ramp because it is creating that root to tip variation. And you do want to place the UVs in tiles. I'm just going to leave it at the default and I'm going to say convert. And now I'm going to just hide this by clicking on H. This is our Xgen asset. So here we have poly surface 1. I'm going to assign a standard surface to this so we can see how that looks. And this is our grass asset, which is in polygons. If you look at the UVs, they're not great. What we can do here is we can just unfold. These are all just planes, so we just unfold them. We orient shells. You can rotate these to have all the UV shells facing in the same direction. So I rotate it so that it is closer to that direction than orient shells. And then to keep it simple, all you would do is just select all of them and layout. And now you have a grass asset that you can use to scatter in Unreal Engine. I wouldn't delete the Xgen because this gives you a lot of customization. So you can just create this grass asset, move it aside, and let's go back to our Xgen and unhide this, and then we can use the same description to just create another grass asset. So yeah, this is how you would go about this, and in another video I'm going to show you how to use the procedural content generation within Unreal to scatter these grass assets.